Now, first of all, on the Cantillon effect, it's a very compelling thought experiment. I think people need to understand that you have to understand and conceptualize how it works, that when money is injected into the system, it could take up to a few years to trickle on down into the economy. A lot of the money that we saw created over the last several years, and it was trillions of dollars, more so than any time in history. The last 4 or 5 years, more money was created in the history of the country preceding it. That money gets, in large part, was thrown into assets by the wealthy. So the wealthy put all this money into assets that inflate. And by the time that money works its way through the system, that inflation, it does so in the form of higher food costs, higher energy costs, and everything. And so the people down at it in the lower and the middle class who are just trying to put food on the table are the most adversely affected. And the people who are able to get it right away, borrow it at next to nothing, and invest it in assets have ridden that inflationary wave higher. When they cash out of these assets and put things into real world economy type of products and services, you began to see massive inflation. So the Cantillon effect is interesting, and people need to understand that when money is created, it can take up to a few years to work its way through the system. That's why we're seeing it right now. And when we talk about, first of all, 44.6% long-term capital gains rate on those earning over $1 million, it's just absolutely asinine, because everyone who's making over $1 million, who's got a whole bunch of long-term capital gains at 44.6, that's double what it is now. They will sell and sell fast. And you talk about 25% unrealized gains on people making over 100 million, and that's no big deal. That's just the rich. Watch what happens to the stock market and the economy and the cryptocurrency market when all of these whales sell. Bang, gone. And the market just goes, whoosh. What the hell just happened? All of those whales, like you were saying, 5 people that own all. Well, think of all the unrealized gains they're sitting on, the Microsofts and the Apples, and these represent large portions of pensions and people don't think this through. Yeah, get them, they're rich. They don't think this through. What percentage of the Bitcoin whales are held in a concentrated group of wallets from the beginning? What are they going to do? If you owe $500 million in unrealized taxes because you're a billionaire with massive wallet of Bitcoin that you bought in $10 a Bitcoin or less, what you going to do? You're going to sell it to pay for it, and bang, watch what happens to the price of Bitcoin. And the same thing is true. This is so anti-American, it's not even funny. And the bigger one is on $1 million, the capital gains rate. There's a lot of people out there who make $1 million a year who have very big stock portfolios and huge positions in things like Apple and Nvidia and all of these massive gains. And maybe they haven't been wanting to sell. They will if she wins. From November to January, if she were to win, it would be the greatest amount of market turbulence that you could ever imagine as this stuff works its way through.
You're talking about, and of course, if you've got $100 million in assets, you can easily move. You can live anywhere in the world.
You can live on your boat in the Caribbean and say, screw it. And all the jobs and all the benefits that come along with it.
In the back of my mind, everyone's been waiting for this grid type of deal where they, EMP or something that would affect the internet or whatnot. You see on Monday a few weeks ago when the Nikkei collapsed, all of a sudden you had 7 or 8 brokerages that all coincidentally were all down at the same time. Vanguard and Fidelity and Robinhood and Schwab, they were all down at the same time. Interesting. But so the central banks have been buying lots of gold, and for the last few years, more so than at any time in history ever, in the last 100 years. And in 2023, Poland was the biggest buyer of gold. And so far this year, they're on pace to beat what they bought last year. And the head of their bank is a man named Adam Glapinski. And I want to read something to you, which is kind of interesting. He says, in 2021, Glapinski announced a plan to expand the country's gold reserves by 100 tons. The central bank reached that goal in September of 23 and has not stopped buying since. When he announced the plan to expand its gold reserves, Glapinski said that holding gold was a matter of financial security and stability. He said that gold will retain its value. Get this shit. Gold will retain its value even when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electronic accounting records. Of course, we do not assume that this will happen, but as the saying goes, forewarned is always insured. And the central bank is required to be prepared for even the most unfavorable circumstances. That is why we see a special place for gold in our foreign exchange management process. I found that to be kind of interesting when you hear someone go to that degree, shutting off the power, destroying all of the records that are in a global system. I mean, it's like, a lot of times these people will leave crumbs, if you will, at your feet. And this is one of those crumbs that I find to be rather interesting.
These countries have been using the suppression of the West to accumulate. And when they all have it, that suppression will end. It will end badly. You can only manipulate a market by pushing in the direction it's going, at least for an extended period of time. And these countries are now, like I've been saying, motivated, coordinated, sophisticated, and wealthy, and they are using every chance they get to drain the system, using these Western prices, which are artificial. They are not real. And even though they're higher in Shanghai to entice arbitrage, they're not real. They're not real, even remotely real. And they'll be much higher based upon the amount of currency creation and based upon the projects that are coming and what it means to, I think, install confidence in a system that's dying for some confidence, dying for something real, because we've squandered that, ad nauseum. So yeah, I think gold and silver will go higher than anyone thinks possible, 100%. And what we see in Shanghai is just the very beginning of it. I think before it's all said and done, you'll see them jack prices up more and more and more and more in the last ditch attempt to siphon away anything from this fraudulent Western system. 59 countries have formally applied to the BRICS Union. At this point, we're not sure who is going to be admitted. In fact, there's even some talk of them holding off on accepting any new entries until they really get everything fortified. And I think a lot of that might settle around the Project Enbridge project and the unit token. But look, the bottom line is simply this, is that what we are seeing with BRICS is an accelerating union, and it's one that needs to be taken very seriously. To dismiss it with recency bias and normalcy bias will be a very big mistake. And of course, they do things very methodically and often don't really tell us what's going to happen until after the meetings take place. They give us little bits of clues, if you will. But the biggest deal to me is the fact that in principle, we have an agreement on a new settlement currency that will be backed by gold. And that's something that fits hand in glove with the Basel III revaluation of gold as a tier one asset, by the massive acquisition of gold and silver by the BRICS nations, and the repatriation of gold from the traditional safeguards in the West, the Bank of England and the New York Fed, which would give direct access to the LBMA in England and the COMEX in New York. And now bringing it home because of some things that are talked about in the white paper, namely the white paper for the unit, namely that the gold that will be held or used for the tokens that will be minted for this new common settlement currency will be held within the countries that possess it, independently audited within vaults, of course. But this is a big deal, and it's a shot across the Western bow. I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out. But to me, that's what we focus on more than anything, even more than the 59 countries that we have been told have formally applied on top of the 10 that are already there. Well, my point of it is that we've gone from a world of respect and mutual respect to one of having to acquiesce and have to kowtow to these fringe ideas. And instead of letting people be who they are and just leave it as is, we now have to bow down and change the fabric of the country. And I think that's partly by design. And when you look at lawlessness, when you look at people being able to rob stores for $900 and not be prosecuted, not even be arrested, when you look at the elections and the judicial system, when you look at the the open borders, all of these things are not lost on the rest of the world. And then you add on to it $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. People don't understand how big that is. You know, I can say $100,000 a second. That's how much debt we're creating. People understand that. But when I say $1 trillion, it just flows, you know, off the tongue and in one ear and out the other. $1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. The numbers are becoming too big to ever fix. So when you talk about destruction of the currency, destruction of our way of life, of respect, of things like authority, of religion, of all of the things that made this country great, the nuclear family, it's not lost on the rest of the world. And that's here at home. That's one piece of the puzzle. And then, of course, the weaponizing of the dollar. We're right now, in fact, I just wrote something down. Let me see if I can find it here, because I couldn't even believe it when I saw this. I think I wrote it down. Let me just see real quick.
Yeah, so it's 100K a second or a minute?
A second.
A second.
$6 million per minute.
Oh God, 6 million a minute. Oh my God, that's true. Okay.
So I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find this, but it just blew me away that the West is sanctioning, if I'm not mistaken, 60% of all of the underdeveloped countries. In some respect, they're being sanctioned. Yeah, I don't know where I put it, but nonetheless, the point of it is that we go around the world and we sanction. And you know, like for example, Janet Yellen says to CNN, "Look, we're okay with Xi and Putin being buddies and BRICS." You know, well, thank you, Madam Secretary. That's very nice of you. But if Xi gives one penny to Putin's war machine, we will sanction their banks, their companies in Beijing itself. Never mind the fact that we've given $160 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight and Stinger missiles and F-16s, and we just agreed to give them a whole bunch more money.
And now these other countries that are not aligned with us are wealthy, sophisticated, and motivated, so they're standing for delivery. And this 85 to 1 price ratio, when it's coming out of the ground at 7 to 1, is the value of the generation. So what the person is basically saying is that you buy silver at an anomaly rate of 85 to 1, which it's a historical anomaly in every way. It's 4 feet of snow in Death Valley in July. That is how big of a geologic and price ratio, historically it is, out of whack. You buy silver at 85 to 1 relationship to gold. If all it does is reach its 200-year price average of 42 to 1, it's a double. If it gets anywhere near what it's coming out of the ground at, it's 11 times the appreciation. Yeah. It is 11 times undervalued because of Western suppression. And I would say I have never in my 34-year career seen an asset class that exhibits the asymmetrical risk-reward scenario that silver does, meaning the lowest downside with the greatest upside. Yes, you could buy it and hang on to it and make a fortune as it rises, and you could buy it and trade some of it into gold when the ratio corrects. I'll give you a real-life example. Okay, the first YouTube video I did was 2010. And hang on one quick second. So the first one I did was in 2010, and I called Vic Swear and I said, Vic, silver gold ratio is 85 to 1. It's the first time in human history it's ever happened. And I said, we got to do something about this. We got to do a podcast. I told everyone, I got on the podcast and I said, gold, sell it to me. I'll sell it to the market, and I'll give you, in theory, depending on what you're trading, what you're buying, 85 ounces of silver. So you give me an ounce of gold, you get 85 ounces of silver. I said, look, the average price average has been 42 to 1 for 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, due to gold's role as money, but the odds ratio has been 16 to 1 for 5,000 years, and now it's even coming out of the ground less. So switch it. And anyone who did that, 7 months later in mid-2011, you had $50 silver and 1915 gold, which is 37 to 1. You would have only needed 37 ounces to trade back into 1 ounce of gold when you got 85 to begin with. You make double what you could have otherwise. So in other words, it's a way for her or he, whoever asked that question, to, in essence, double the amount of gold they could have otherwise bought when they bought that silver. So the answer is yes, I consider that to be the trade of a generation. And because gold is the only other tier 1 reserve asset on the planet, as reclassified by the Bank of International Settlements, the most powerful bank in the world, that is a trade that I am keen on recommending to people when the ratio corrects back into at least its average. And at 42 to 1, which is a double, that's just the average of the last 200 years, still 7 times higher than it's coming out of the ground at. And at some point, physical demand and geological demand must meet, or either that or you figure out a way to make gold and silver in a lab.
Silver set to soar on Samsung solid state battery breakthrough.
Yeah, that's a
more
big
competition
deal.
For silver.
That's a big deal, and it's they're already, according to that article, in collaboration with Toyota and other car manufacturers to integrate this technology. There are rumors that it's up to 1 kilo of silver per vehicle, and that it has 9-minute charging, 20-year lifespan, and 600-mile range. That's the real deal. Maybe this is part of the reason that China, which is the second largest producer of silver in the world, is flying all around Latin America, buying up all of the unrefined silver, the doré bars and the concentrate, paying as much as double what the West will pay, and shipping it back to China to have it refined there. That way, all of that silver they're buying is not coming off of an exchange, and it's invisible. And so you realize that not only are they the second largest producer in the world, they used to be a net exporter. They have now turned to a net importer. And I did an interview with a guy named Sean Kunkun, who's a hell of a nice guy, hell of a smart guy. He's the CEO of Dolly Varden. And he said, yeah, I can confirm it, that this is indeed the case, that China is flying all around Latin America, paying up for unrefined silver in doré and concentrate form, paying more than anyone would pay, sending it home, refining it, and it's invisible that way. So the drivers for silver have never been stronger.
And then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, Trump speaks in Tennessee at the Bitcoin conference, and he says, we'd like to if I'm elected, I want to have a strategic Bitcoin account for the country. And right after he spoke, Senator Loomis from Wyoming gets up on stage and says, I've just submitted a bill that will support what President Trump is talking about, a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but I am advocating for revaluing the Federal Reserve's gold to pay for it. And every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would put $1 trillion in the Treasury General account. And Janet wouldn't even need congressional approval. She can just go to Jerome and say, Jerome, revalue the gold. And just like that. So, you put gold at $20,000 an ounce, as crazy as that sounds, that puts $5 trillion free and clear into the Treasury account, the TGA account. And she can spend it any way she sees fit. So why not make gold $120,000 an ounce? I mean, every central bank in the world owns it. They've all been buying it hand over fist. Your debt is now completely offset with your equity, your assets. If Bitcoin can be $1 million, why can't gold be 120,000? It's important to note that the Bank of International Settlements, which is the most prestigious bank in the world, they are the central bank, the most powerful. They reclassified gold 3 years ago, or actually 2019, now it's already almost 5 years ago, as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset. Now, since the end of World War II, it's been dollars and treasuries. Why would the most powerful bank in the world reclassify gold as the world's only other tier 1 reserve? And why are all the central banks buying it hand over fist, more so than at any time in history? And why are they all repatriating it from the New York Fed and the Bank of England? The New York Fed gave direct access to the COMEX, the Bank of England, to the LBMA. We've held everyone's gold, and so has England, for the last 50, 60 years because of Western rule of law and safe jurisdiction and access to the main trading hubs. Now they're all repatriating it, and they're all buying it because they don't trust us anymore. They don't trust us that we will represent their best interests and give it back when we're supposed to. But every single central bank on the planet's been buying gold for the last several years. Every single central bank on the planet owns gold. And whatever a central bank says is the price really is the price if they're willing to make a market in it. In China right now, silver is $4 an ounce higher on the Shanghai Gold Exchange.
So is that what the price of silver is? If you have the ability to sell it to China, to the Shanghai Exchange, and deliver it there, it sure as heck is. So the bottom line is, if indeed these central banks were to revalue the price of gold and say, okay, it's 120,000 an ounce, immediately like that, our balance sheet goes from 123% debt to GDP to perfect, pristine, from putrid to pristine, just like that. Now we'll make a market in. Send us your gold. We'll pay you 125,000 an ounce for it. That is, in essence, what they are saying. You revalue gold to offset your liabilities and to never let it come back down, because it would then marry, in my opinion, you would see a marriage between blockchain technology and gold, and it would peg to a new system and would never come back down. And one of my mentors along the way, Jim Sinclair, said that's what would happen. Now, he way undersold it. He said 10,000 would be the level, will never come back down. But understand this. Every $4,000 increase in the price of gold, based upon the amount of 21, I did the math recently, the 8,300 metric tons we have, I forgot how many exact ounces, but every $4,000 that you raise the price of gold puts $1 trillion free and clear in the Treasury general account. And Janet wouldn't even need congressional approval to do this. She just tells her buddy Jerome, revalue the gold. Boom, it's revalued. Now she gets free and clear $1 trillion for every $4,000 increase in the price of gold, free and clear in the TGA account.